Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to an afternoon panel. I'm Sika Dagbovie-Mullins. I'm a professor at Florida Atlantic University, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Super excited to talk to these amazing, brilliant writers. I want to start off by asking questions related to the two themes for this year's seminar, right? Pay attention and the novel. And so I was thinking about how the phrase pay attention can mean two things, right? Obviously, pay attention in terms of like listen closely, watch closely, right? But pay attention can also be a warning, right? Like pay attention, be careful, right? Pay attention, watch out. And so I was thinking about, are there things that your characters, I'm thinking in particular about your most recent novels, although I guess it could apply to any, but are there things that your characters or your texts are asking readers to pay attention to? Are there things your characters or texts are warning us about, warning us as readers? Or maybe, that the text wants readers to watch closely, if we think about the different iterations of pay attention?
Everybody's looking at me. I mean, my characters make so many bad choices, I wish they paid attention. One of in A Brief History, there's a journalist, and everybody, including the reader, finds out that he solved the murder of Bob Marley. He's the only person who doesn't realize it. So the next scene, when he wakes up and there's a hitman sitting on his bed to kill him, he's like, "How did this happen?" Because when Caribbean writers in particular talk a lot about erasure. And Edwidge Danticat would say she writes as a response to erasure. And it is a way of saying, pay attention to this. So there is something about, and I'm not going to speak for every Caribbean novel, but there is something about our novels that is saying, you did not pay attention to this, or you're paying attention to the wrong thing, or you're learning the wrong lesson. But even the novel in itself, a novel is not a history book. I think a novel can zoom in on things that history might just, sometimes through no fault of history, miss. And for me, people call me a historical novelist, which I'm slightly offended by, because I was born in the era that I write about. But at the same time, for me, I revisit a lot of things. I tend to revisit eras that I think that there is a story there that we haven't, to use a phrase, paid attention to. So I find myself doing that.
The question was about readers. What do you want? Okay, sorry.
Or if there's something you as writer want through the text,
well,
readers.
There's obviously layers of attention. I hope that readers will just pay attention on a sentence level. But then I also, one of the things, I guess my first novel is set in 2008. That's history now too.
Oh God,
which
no.
is crazy. But my first two novels are pretty contemporary, in that I am interested in readers paying attention to right now and paying attention to those two books, particularly what it is we're doing in this country, and how is that affecting us on the inside. But there's also there's all kinds of things. When you end up writing a novel, it ends up being an accumulation of all the things you were just interested in or fixated on when you were working on it. So sometimes it's just pay attention to these little jokes. I think I'm funny sometimes. Or, pay attention to these particular patterns that I feel right now people find themselves in, especially in my new book, In the Wilderness. I feel there's a lot of pay attention to how you're spending your time, which feels like a very contemporary concern. It's all of that.
What you mentioned remind me of Rachel Kushner's keynote, where she was talking about the way in which she draws on film or cinema or cinematic moments, and then incorporates it into her writing. And I remember her saying that she seemed to pay particular attention to nuances or to seemingly insignificant moments, right, or tangential details, and then that came out in her work. So given your response, I'm just thinking about, like, are there things that you as a writer pay, like she was using film, are there things that you pay particular attention to, maybe for inspiration, that you use in your writing and your work?
One of the things that I really enjoy about your historical novel, Based When You Were Born, is I really enjoy, and I think if I could say we have something in common, it doesn't feel historical because it just feels like it's really interested in all of, like, what made, like, the fabric of that moment. Like, what were people listening to? How were they speaking? How were they dressing? In this way that doesn't feel like it feels. One of the things that people do when they're writing fiction is they sometimes, for some reason, think if I put too much of right now in it, it's going to be aged.
Yeah.
But it felt the opposite. It felt both of a time, but also like how you live now, because how you live now, you're listening to music, you're receiving whatever political messaging, all of that is, like, layered in. And I think that's something that I'm interested in doing also, is I don't ever worry about, like, if I say these people are on Twitter, that's not what it's called anymore. Like, first off, I'm still calling it Twitter, but also it's like, this is just, to me, it feels like optimism to write about what it is, what it feels like in this exact moment, because part of it is I'm hoping one day somebody will care about what were people thinking about in this moment, you know? They'll want to go back to the text. And so I'm just really, anything that it feels like the way people are speaking on the internet makes it into the wilderness a lot, the way just the small turns of phrases that they don't even last like 6 months and people stop using some of these bits of language. It feels like it all needed to be in there.
I pay attention to things I don't think I can do. Like with the wilderness, the wilderness is about how people together fall apart. And people call them together relationships, whether it's friendships or family or so on, and how in the same chemistry of what brings them together is also what pulls them apart. And that's one of the things that I love about that and the Turner House. I also, there are things I pay attention to. I'm obsessed with short novels. I know, right? Because I don't write anything short. I read Claire Keegan back and front, like, how did you do it? You know, I have a special hatred for poets.
Yeah.
And I always read with them, which is terrible.
Yeah.
Because I am like, wow, it took me 200 pages to do that thing we did on 2. As a special punishment, I tend to read with Patricia Smith a lot, just to punish myself.
Yeah.
God, there's so many people here I admire. I was telling Claire Massou that my version of her novels tend to have more of my writing than her writing in it. Because I read a lot when I'm writing. And because I do, and a lot of it filters in. Not in ways I can see that maybe other people don't. Like, I don't know if people who read Brief History knew that the book I was reading the most was To the Lighthouse. Not To the Lighthouse, sorry, Mrs. Dalloway. Because that sort of internal, external at the same time is something I'm trying to do all the time. So I'm reading that. So I pay attention to that. People who manage economy, because I cannot do that. I still can't believe you read me off his 289 pages. You know, at page 289, my characters just wake up. So, but yeah, it's. I think if you are going to be a writer, the first thing you have to figure out is how to read. And I think, I teach undergrads, and every year, one student thinks they're going to be the person who writes something of genius despite reading nothing. And I begin, there's nothing I can teach you here. That there's a huge aspect of writing you're only going to learn from reading.
Yeah.
The only way I learned to write women was reading. And I resisted that when somebody said to me, you think she said, I was writing my first novel, and she says, you're a pretty good writer, but you don't have a clue about women. And I was like, I have a mother. I was like a Republican senator. I have sisters. And then she asked me, who have I read? And I could only mention one or two writers, and they were both dead. Mm. And she is a person who said, you need to go read Toni Morrison right now. Mm. And I read Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and Paul Marshall and Gail Jones and Iris Murdoch and so on. And honestly, that's how I learned to write those voices. Mm-hmm. Some of these things you have to read your way to learn it. Yeah. So to go back to the paying attention thing, you have to, a huge part of learning to write is observing how others did it. Yeah. So I'm always, when people say they don't want to be influenced when they're writing, I go, man, you can only hope. Yeah. I look out for the moments where I go, oh yeah, that's where I was reading Margaret Atwood when I wrote that. Mm. And yeah.
I'm so curious. I want to get back to this obsession with short novels, says the man with the 600-page, right? Mm-hmm. That's fascinating to me because I was thinking about, today I attended, Kiana's, was talking about the White Hot, right, her novel, mm-hmm. and she said that it started out as a play, but I wrote this down, but became a novel by necessity, and I thought that was a really interesting phrasing, and I know that you both have written, nonfiction essays, and that you have some short stories, but that it seems like, you've both focused on the novel form, and so I'm just wondering, especially given your comment for both of you, like, what is it about this genre that you find so appealing or so necessary? Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure Marlon has more to say about this than me, but I've done some TV writing mm-hmm. also. Nothing has gotten made. I don't have an IMDb, but I'm in the Writers Guild, which is a very LA way to live. I am from LA.
The health insurance is really good.
Yeah, that's true. But so what I realized teaching myself how to write, how to make a script, is that I just like to be inside of people's heads in this mm-hmm. way that if everything has to, you have to find a correlating image mm-hmm. when you're writing, for the screen, which is its own exercise, and certainly an exercise in economy, mm-hmm. but it is not how I derive pleasure as a reader. I just need interiority. There are some writers, obviously, who I get a lot of pleasure from, and they don't have a lot of interiority, and mm-hmm. I'm always trying to figure out, what is it, what itch are they scratching? Because so much of what, I'm interested in is how people are receiving experiences and each other. And I think that the novel, it's also just cheap, right? Mm-hmm. These other art forms, it's a group project, one, mm-hmm. and then two, if I just want to make a hurricane, I just do it. It doesn't, I don't have to run it by anyone. It doesn't cost anything. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it really does feel to me to be a medium that is just paper, and I just have to force myself to think about a thing long enough to make it happen versus having to think about the exterior reasons why it may not be able to happen the way that I would like for it to happen. Mm.
I've written screenplays and I've written for television, and I'm not a fan. Because it's true, if you want to bring in a hurricane, it has to be run. You have to run it by 4 or 5 people, and then stars would go. If there's no sex scene in a hurricane, we don't want it, or something. Or is there a role in the hurricane for Julia Roberts? Right. And so on. And,
she's a storm tracker.
I know. I mean, she was almost Harriet Tubman. So y'all act like that's something, like I made that up.
No.
And then the thing is, after you do all of that, you have to still make sure the script doesn't sound like it was written by a committee. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole different thing. It reminds me about back when I was in advertising, and that's a whole different kind of writing as well. And I think script writing is actually closer to advertising than to anything else. I think I'm in a novel because, I just get to sort of plop my ass down and look around. and sort of do what I want. Short stories scare the crap out of me. I still think a short story is closer related to the poem than the novel, which would probably explain why I can't do it. Notice my obsession with poets. And even with poetry, it's funny because most of the thesis projects I work on in school are poetry projects. I mean, I think I know what a good poem looks like, and I think I can help somebody make a good poem. But I'm just a midwife there. The novel, I think, I think I make a whole pile of mistakes one on top of the other, and just what I like, a novel gives a space for that. It's one of the reasons why I love Moby Dick. People who say Moby Dick could have chopped 200 pages miss the point. I tell people, you want to understand Trump, read Moby Dick. A chill comes over the audience.
I was going to say, and then read
That
Tony
better mean that because you haven't read Moby Dick yet, and you need to. I just think it's such a rewarding and generous medium and forgiving medium for me, and I think that's why, and I feel most at home there. You want to freak me out? Ask me for a short story, and I will take longer on a 20-page short story than on a 400-page novel.
Wow.
The only reason I ever was able to write a short story for like an anthology is because in my head I was like, this is going to be in my novel.
Yeah.
It's a chapter. That is the thought experiment I needed to do to be able to write it. And it is in the wilderness. And also there are, I think, 3 poems that I would have never let be in the world as just poems, but in the novel as like a character's poems, then they can live because they can be forgiven.
Yeah. Oh God, I wrote one poem once, and I read it to the audience and acted as if somebody else wrote it, just to see what the audience would be like.
That's basically what I'm doing.
Yeah, and if they loved it, it would have been great. If they hated it, that would have been fantastic. But they're just indifferent.
Oh.
Yeah, I was like, well, their end of the poetry career. Speaking of other genres, it's funny. My second novel started as a play, The Book of Night Woman, because I couldn't figure out what I was going to do for my college thesis, and I remember I was working on this play for the drama class, and I was like, sorry, drama, I'm going to have to betray you and take this plot. And that's how it started. So I mean, I have done other forms of writing that eventually still become the novel.
Yeah. Earlier you were complimenting Angela on the 2 novels and also this kind of sense of family. You mentioned family, right? How, particularly in the wilderness, I think about the 4 young women who are friends, who all kind of come together. There's like a particular moment or scene where a character suffers a loss and is going through grief paralysis, and all of her friends, come. And you have this, it's a brief line, you just write, these women showed up for me so completely that I often wept. And I was thinking about that concept of chosen family or families that we make. And then in Black Leopard, Red Wolf, right, we eventually learn that Tracker has a chosen family or makes a family, right? Or chooses a family as well. And so I was thinking about, and last year, our seminar theme was family. Some of you might remember. So I was just thinking about, like, what do these unconventional, I suppose, families offer us, or maybe help us see about ourselves, or how do they attend to our pain, or in that instance, our grief differently than...
Oh my God, I was going to give an answer from your novel. I'm going to do it. So the thing about the wilderness is that there's both. There's a family you can't help, and there's a price to pay for that if you follow Desiree and, is it Danielle? No, I forget.
Danielle, yeah.
Yeah, Desiree. Oh, I remembered. And there's a price to pay for that when it's not chosen. Yeah. But then at a certain point, the non-chosen family has to choose to be family. Yeah. Which is kind of what one of the things that the wilderness is about. So you don't even have to answer your question.
Thank you.
Yeah. And same thing with friends, I think. The chosen family thing, I think it's something when you know you're in the room because you're liked or you're loved, or even approved of, as opposed to you're just there. But that has its frailties too, which is also in the book. Yeah, you know, for me in Black Leopard, the family happened almost by accident.
Really?
It's weird. Even the queerness happened by accident in that novel. People like, no, I didn't set out to write a gay-ass book. Because it's sometimes the chosen, it's not that they're chosen, it's just that you're just the only ones left. You know, if anybody's been a nerd in school, you know, it's not that we chose to be fellow nerds, we're just the ones everybody don't.
Yeah.
We don't even like each other that much.
Right.
So it's to say the circumstances almost eventually become irrelevant. Just because your family, my cousin said this, just because we're related, that don't mean we're family. And I was like, that's why I don't talk to you, dear. And so on. So it's circumstances is not a condition for family or so on. And I think that's what happens when it's chosen or it's thrust upon you. You still have to navigate it, and it doesn't always end up well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I feel like in my adult life, I have been really fortunate to experience is deep friendship with queer people, because I feel like it has taught me a lot about what it is to build family outside of, I come from a giant family. My father was like the fifth of 13. And to build family outside of biological relation. And in my 20s, I feel like there was a lot of heterosexual people just do not know how to remain friends. After they become in a couple, after they get married, after they have children, I think that the drive, especially in this country, to have a nuclear family and friends are practiced for that in some way, and then you move on from it, is one of the many reasons why we have, loneliness epidemic happening in this country. And I think being friends and being in real community with queer people, I learned early oh no, you just don't stop picking up the phone because you have a new boyfriend, right? Or perhaps even when you break up with this boyfriend, maybe you guys will be friends, right? Which is not a thing also that I think most heterosexual people have any sort of understanding of. Not every ex needs to remain in your life. But sometimes, just because it's not a romantic relationship doesn't mean that there has to be nothing. And I think that that's something that I tried to think about in my book, was just, what does it mean to be in community with people? And what does it mean I think it's something that's going to be required more and more in the future. It's required today, but even more in the future is thinking broader about who is it possible to be in community with. It can't just be people who look exactly like you, who worship exactly like you, who are necessarily the same income bracket as you. That's not going to cut it, And so that is something that I've tried to pay attention to more, in my life and in my fiction.
Yeah, thanks. I was thinking maybe we can shift gears, and I was thinking about connections between your works in terms of temporality and time, that you both obviously play with time, you disrupt chronology, they're non-linear, right? In both Turner House too, right? There's chapters narrated from the 40s, and then we're back to the present, and the wilderness goes back and forth, right? And in your trilogy, it's circuitous, right? It's in fact, sometimes we find out about things after they've already happened and such, right? So I'm just wondering, if you can maybe talk about the process of creating a nonlinear text, if you go into it thinking planning it, or if it comes afterwards, or I'm always curious on behalf of the reader if there's intent behind that, what the intent or what you hope that for a reader who's reading things, not going in linear fashion.
Can I piggyback on your question, Sika?
Yes.
Marlon.
Oh no.
I'm nervous.
I might not find myself on a stage with you again, so I'm just going to ask you all of the craft questions. I'm just interested in how, just reader, like, trust that a reader can do it. It feels, one of the things that I deeply sort of enjoy when I read your novels is that I feel that you respect the reader, that the reader can synthesize this information, that the reader can jump POVs, even if they're all first person, that the reader can jump time and come back. How do you get there?
You know, the thing is, even, you know, when I was with an indie press and I couldn't find a publisher and an agent or anything, I just always believed the reader was out there. And I never, you know, I've lost faith in this industry a million times. I don't think I ever lost faith in the reader. I just thought, I always believed they could do it. I remember the very first reading, I was reading from my first novel, and my publisher came to me and go, "Wow, you're really reading as if everybody got it, didn't you?" And I'm like, "They didn't?" I do. I put a lot of trust in the reader. Also, the great thing about books is that you can just read them over and over. The funny thing is, I read very slow, and it's actually really hard for me. So, like, I have a rule. Every book I read the first 50 pages and then start over. And half of it I saw I missed the first time. So yeah, there is, for me, I've always sort of trusted that. If nothing else, there's that list cast of characters at the front.
Yeah.
Right. You know, all the books, including the book upcoming, has one. So people can always, go back. But I also think, this may go back to some of the stuff Rachel was talking about yesterday, is that I also am hugely influenced by film. And by cinema, and by jump cuts, and by, you know, Breathless was a big deal for me. And so on. And how do you sort of go all over the place, but make sure you bring it back home in some way or another? And I think that's the part for me, is as long as you bring back home. I think I reward the reader's patience. At least I hope I do. And so on. And I totally forgot what your part of the question was.
Oh, I kind of did too.
Sorry, I just like
Well, we both have to
co-opted
answer
it. I think it was.
Yeah. Oh, it's about time and temporality and expectations for the reader.
Well, for me, that one is funny. The first page that my readers read is never the first page that I write. I've tried writing novels A to Z. It just doesn't happen. I just don't have that kind of attention span. I'd be like, yeah, that's important, but I really want to write this sex scene or something. So I write the scene that I find that a reader wants to pull me in the book first. And the funny thing is, a lot of times those scenes don't even end up in the book. The first 50 pages of Black Leopard never ended up in Black Leopard. The first 50 pages of Night Woman did not end up in Night Woman. The first 10 pages in Brief History now begin on page 420. And once I got over that, it was way easier to start writing a book. Because I think sometimes you feel you have to start at the beginning of the novel, or the beginning of your thought, or the beginning of the character. You really don't. Anything that gets you into a book, get into it.
Yeah.
And I say that to students because everybody has blank page pressure. I was like, just anything that gets you into it, that's it. And be prepared. But for me, though, you have to be prepared to write 50 pages to throw away. You know, and it's the thing. I think sometimes people are a little too in love with their work. I tell people my books are like my fifth child. Just take him. just take him and go.
Do I have anything to add? I think I also am a person, it's just like whatever I feel like is the thing that I can write on that day, that is the thing I'm going to write on that day. And I have like a feeling in my heart somewhere about like the overall movement, but I don't feel like the process of writing it has to mirror like the end movement at all. And then there's also parts that are like, oh, I just don't think I'm smart enough to write this yet. So like, you just need to sit over here until I can figure out, or I'm not in an emotional, like I'm not mature enough to write this thing that I know needs to happen. So you just need to sit over here until I am there. Like I can, and usually it's just like deadlines coming. So it's like, oh, I have to write this chapter. Like I always knew I had to write this chapter, but now there's nothing else to do but write this chapter. But I also think that the shape of a book has to mirror like whatever the central concern is in a way. And I think that, like, for instance, in The Wilderness, it is a book about the last 20 years of American life as much as it is a book about 20 years in the life of this friend group.
Yeah.
And so it is not, when you think about the last 20 years of American life, where it's like, what fucked up alternate universe are we in? The moments that you might think about, just thinking about like from 2006 to today, they're not chronological. I feel like there are moments that sort of pop up, and then there are other moments that pop up once you've remembered that moment. And it is not about chronology, it is about these shifts and the way that those shifts are like related to each other. So
it's like COVID too. I mean, in addition to all the obviously political things, like when you have a COVID memory, you're like, wait, when was that?
That feels like it was yesterday, but it was 6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted a book that felt like that. Like time was related to the story that needed to be told, not however many like days have passed. And it also has to do with, if it's a story also of this group of friends, all of them have different moments that they would say are the moments they knew that this person was their family, that this person could not be their family, et cetera. So it was not about just what happened once after one thing after the next.
Marlon, earlier you mentioned somebody making a comment about your ability to write female characters, and you listed a bunch of, I remember you said Toni Morrison, Paula Marshall, these black female writers that you went and read. And I think if I read the interview correctly, I saw an interview where you mentioned wanting to write like Octavia Butler in this trilogy. I don't know if you, but I'm struck by that because you know, Angela, in The Wilderness, you have at least, well, there are references to, there's explicit reference to like Samuel Delaney, but Octavia Butler, and then there's a character who's an unhomed woman who's named Octavia Butler. So I was just wondering if...
She's named Octavia, yeah.
Octavia. Okay, that was me adding in. Yeah, she's named Octavia. But there's an earlier reference to, right, where they're all talking and somebody mentions Octavia Butler. So I was just wondering, given that comment and that reference, if you know, if Butler's influenced you as a writer or your work, or...
I mean, she was a definite influence when I was writing Black Leopard and when I was writing Moonwitch, even though my books are set in the past. I'm almost kind of scared to read Octavia now because Parable of the Sword is no longer fiction.
Yeah.
There's a character in it who actually says, "Make America Great." And it's you know, I think a lot of times when people think science fiction is going to become science fact, it would be Buck Rogers, you know, or Star Wars or some foolishness like that. And it's hard. It can be hard reading. But then then a lot of the lessons that you find in Octavia Butler, you also find in Toni Morrison. The things that really matter and the bonds that really survive, whether you're writing about the past or the future. They matter. Just why you can literally read Toni Morrison and Octavia Butler at the same time. You lose all faith in America if you do that, but but you kind of develop faith in yourself, which is one of the things I love about reading her.
I think that is it. Yeah, I agree. I think also for thinking about particularly, there's like a character in The Wilderness who says that Octavia Butler had it wrong, this one thing, which is that it's never going to be, in Parable of the Sower, it's like the unhoused, sort of like drug addicted population kind of attacks these people in this little settlement. Yeah. And this character is like, it was always going to be the other way around, that the people who are in the settlements are going to attack those people.
Yeah.
And I've thought about this a lot. Like, it feels very sacrilegious to be like, there are things in Parable of the Sower that make me anxious. And like Butler, you thinking about the time when it came out, you know, very post like crack epidemic 80s, and Butler's, some of the depictions of like the way that Los Angeles, a place that I'm from, and she was from, it's going to devolve. I find those things to be things that I still feel like some tension about. As much as I admire the work, I also,
Yeah.
but then it's like this is all through the POV of a very specific future cult leader, right? And so it's a rich text. Like there's
Yeah.
so much there that I feel like is prescient, but it's also of its time.
Yeah.
That I feel like people are so interested in the parts that are prescient that they also don't think about it being of its time.
Yeah.
But you really have to do both to think about like what the project was for her at that moment.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Okay, so for my last question, I wanted to mention that when I was like reading both of your, particularly, well, your recent novels, I think this applies to all of them as well, that I found myself questioning whether or not what the characters shared or what they revealed was true or not. And that made me think about, there's a section in Black Leopard, Red Wolf. It's the chapter, for those of you who've read, where Tracker is talking to the Inquisitor. And can I quote from you, if you don't mind? May I read really quickly? It was just too perfect. So the chapter begins, and that is all and all is truth, great Inquisitor. You wanted a tale, did you not? From the dawn of it to the dusk of it, and such is the tale I have given you. What you really wanted was testimony, but what you really wanted was story. Is it not true? And then a few sentences later, what is truth when it always expands and shrinks? Truth is just another story. And so I was like wondering about that relationship between truth and storytelling, right? As it relates to like narration and point of view. And I guess it's another intent question, but like, perhaps, I don't know if you can tell us a little bit about your intent when you offer us characters that are not completely reliable, right? I think about like the sisters, and like which story I am, they have two different stories of how they've become estranged. I mean, not different, but different takes on how they've become estranged, right? When there's characters we're unsure, right? What is the intent in terms of, that what is the truth in the storytelling and such?
One of the things I noticed reading a lot of fantasy is sometimes a lot of fantasy, it's very important that you know who the hero is, and it's very important that you know the villain is, and it's very important you know how good vanquishes evil, and a lot are written. And it's just not a knock. A lot of it is written, certainly a lot of Western stories are written where the fact that this story is narrated means it's true. And you're supposed to believe it. Unless I announce I'm an unreliable narrator. And a lot of African storytelling is not like that. A lot of African storytelling is about the trickster or told by the trickster.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that. Like when I wrote Black Leopard, I believed Tracker. When I wrote Moonwitch Spider King, I believed Sogalon, and their stories totally contradict each other. One of the things that's interesting when you go back and read the old stories is we have this way of tying orality with primitivity, that the oral tradition is some kind of primitive thing. And yet the people who had to listen to stories had to do far more sophisticated work than we did. Because I am not telling you who's the hero of the story, and tomorrow my hero is going to be a villain. And the burden of truth is with you as the listener. You're going to have to decide who's the hero. You're going to have to decide, you're going to have to find the morality if there is one. And there is a lot that is thrown on the listener, the oral tradition, that in some ways gets spoon-fed to we who read pages and so on. And that's one of the things that I noticed with these old stories, a lot of the burden of truth lies with you deciding what you're going to believe.
Yeah.
In Jamaican storytelling, usually at the end of a story, they say this phrase, Jack Mandoro, I'm gonna choose none. Which is like basically saying, that's my story, do you believe it? No, tell me another one. And that's how you end every story.
Yeah.
And, it's just like, are you gonna believe Arabian Nights or not? and so on. And because there is a huge responsibility the listener, the reader has with old-time storytelling. And I wanted to bring that back. So even truth is, as I said, when I wrote those books, I believe those characters, even though they're not they're telling stories that contradict each other.
Yeah.
I think that I think before, when I was a younger writer, I thought that there was some supreme, like, emotional truth that could exist in a novel.
Yeah.
That just reading the same book again for like the fourth, fifth time, I realized that's not even necessarily, like, there is not necessarily like a one truth that the writer is pointing you toward
Yeah.
that is going to sort of supersede all other interpretations. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in the multi-POV novel, is because you can just present these perspectives and a reader can make a choice themselves, and perhaps the next time they read, and they will choose something else as a truth. I have one friend who I love, who is a record executive, and when he's read both my novels, he texts me whose team he's on. Like, he's like, oh, I'm Team Desiree now. I'm Team Cha-Cha. And he's done this with both books, and I find it to be really funny because the way that he reads is like, who do I believe? And then he'll be like, I'm actually not team. Like, when he gets to a chapter that it changes that, he's like, I'm not on this team anymore. I'm on this team now, or I'm never going to be on this person's team. And I think that is part of why I've been drawn, even though I swear I'm not going to do another multi-PV novel again, because I'm going to write an under 300 page. Little slim, compact thing, the next one.
I keep trying with every one of mine.
Right? But part of why it feels like I need to have all of these voices is because of my, perhaps it is the ancestors, perhaps it is a real sort of a deep sort of distrust of one truth.
Yeah. I love that response you said about, there's not one singular emotional truth, and each time you come to the novel, because I think I can speak for the readers here, right, that, I think about books that I teach in class, that when I taught it when I was 30, it was different when I was 35, and different, right, that when we read books, we see different things, and we see different emotional truths that come out, right, each time that we,
There was nothing more depressing than the time I read Sula, and I was like, I'm Team Nell. I was like, where am I at in my life right now?
Yeah,
It
right.
was just one time. I was like, I'm Team Nell. I was like, oh, this is saying a lot about you right now. Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure we have some room, some time for questions, so I think we have time for a few if the audience has some.
Somebody behind you, Matt.
If you have a question, please stand and we'll bring the mic to you.
Thank you. I have a question. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think paying attention to the threads between fiction and real life, perhaps it's always my question when I read, but this is for Angela specifically, but Marlon and also all writers. I started part 4 of The Wilderness on Wednesday with the news that came out of Minneapolis, and finished on Thursday, and I actually had to read part 4 a couple of times just because of everything that was going on. So my question is somewhat, as writers, do you hope to impact change? And in the context of The Wilderness specifically, because I feel like a lot of the characters are considering who to help, when to help, if to help. Do you help your friend? Do they want your help? Are you done? It just seemed like there was so much going on, and it felt even more so in the context of this week.
Thank you for reading. I don't know if it was good for you or not to read this week, but thank you. When I think about the change I hope to make, I'm changed anytime I read a really good book. I don't know if I write to, I don't imagine a specific outcome for a reader. And so I think if there's anything with this book, it was just, as I touched on before, is maybe that was my like shout in the dark about just generally what is it going to take for people in this country to think differently about who can be in their community. But I don't know if I have enough self-esteem / hubris, depending, to say that I would hope my book does anything besides maybe the person on your street, you think that maybe they could be in your community. Yeah.
Just to echo that, I don't know if I place that sort of expectation on my books. I was, humbled when I hear that books, because books have done that for me. And I'm changed every time I read a book, a novel as well. Well, any book, really. There's a part of me that hope that, my story does to somebody what Sula did for me. Sula completely changed my life. But I don't go around. I don't know if I can go around with the burden of how am I going to change somebody's life with this thing. I think you write the best story you can tell, and the best stories do that work. Yeah. Toni Morrison said Tolstoy could never know that he wrote a novel for a 9-year-old black girl in Ohio.
Yeah.
But he did. So I think I don't even know if I'm supposed to know what effect or the changes the books are supposed to have.
We have another question over here.
I'm a terrible public speaker, so I'm just going to start with that.
You have the accent on your side. You're doing great.
I absolutely loved this session. It was by far and away my favorite session. I found it so deep and really interesting. And it was a question for Marlon about A Brief History. And I was first reading it, and it makes sense to me that you cited Mrs. Dalloway, because I was like, this is like Ulysses. I wonder if it's like Ulysses in Dublin and this in Kingston. And it was really a question about the violence in the book. And I loved American Psycho, which I thought was very violent and very brilliant. And I love your book. How do you cope with, as a writer and a human being, engaging in that level of violence, coming in and out of it with your writing?
There are quite a few answers to that. It's funny, I actually don't, on one hand, I don't think the novels are as violent as people think they are. I think, I give this example of Led Zeppelin. That Led Zeppelin is like the gold standard for hard rock, heavy metal, I think all of that. Yet almost every Led Zeppelin album is 60% acoustic. So technically, they're a folk band with some angry moments. But what they have and the trick they learn is resonance. That after that hard rock song plays, it echoes and it resonates. And I think in some ways violence or sex or whatever is the same thing. That violence has effects. Violence, I got into a fight with a Canadian interviewer. You're not going to find it because they never aired it. Because they were like, why are your books so violent? And I said, you know what, who you kidding? You love that shit. But then I said, the thing is, it has to be presented in a way that they find palatable. So James Bond or John Wick can kill 300 fathers, sons, brothers, lovers, friends, and we march off into sunset with his dog. Because it's kind of bloodless. There is violence without suffering, or there's violence without consequence. And I think one violent scene with suffering is going to disturb you a lot more than 100 shootouts where we just walk off. And that's the thing. I just don't turn away. And I don't know if the reader should turn away either. I think I always said, if you see it anywhere, I said violence is violent. And sex is sometimes sexy. I just don't turn away. The thing you don't want to do, and I hope I don't do it, is to turn it into a kind of pornography. Because the people think pornography titillates us. It actually numbs us. And I think if people tell me they're horrified by what's in the book, I'm like, oh, I did a good job then. If it gets to the point where they just don't care. You know, I teach this book, The Sexual Life of Catherine M., Catherine Millet's book. And the thing about that book that's interesting is by the time you get to sexual encounter number 466, you're just like, when is this going to end? It's because you're no longer offended or intimate or certainly not titillated. You're numbed. And actually, I think Catherine was going for that. So yeah, for me, the response to it should stay visceral and should be uncomfortable. I love being discomforted by a novel. I read this novel called As Meat Loves Salt by Maria McCann. It's one of my absolute favorite ever books. And there are parts in that novel where I was like, and for me to say this, I don't think I can make it through this book. And I've written some sick shit. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can do it. And yet that's the same book within a week. I'm missing every subway stop. At night, I'm fretting, what's gonna happen to him? No, I'm gonna go to bed. I have to find out, oh my God, is he gonna make it okay? This is not a good guy in the book. But that's the response to when I think it's written well. I think when it's not written well, you end up with a certain numbness, I think. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.